All right, welcome. Thank you for being here for our session today. Engage, motivate, inspire, reimagining the first day of class. So obviously we timed this session knowing that first day of class for many will be coming in 2 weeks approximately. So we wanted to be able to prop something up that hopefully can spark some new ideas for you. And we're going to share some strategies today. We'll get into a little bit of research behind those briefly to ground it. We'll do some strategies. We'll do some sharing of what some of you are doing already. And then in closing, we'll give you some of our resources that'll help you create the techniques that you're seeing today very quickly with some of our optimizers. So more on that coming toward the end. We'll give you access, and I'll demo a couple of those based on time that's left, 2 or 3 of those. Okay, introducing myself, I should do that. Brett Christie, I'm VP for Educational Innovation at Alchemy, and I've been in that position for about 4.5 years. Before that, I was higher education for about 25 years as faculty and faculty developer at the campus and system level in California. All right, goals for today. So we're going to establish that importance. Why are we spending time here today? 200 of you and over 500 registered. Why is this a topic of interest? And why do we want to try and think about the best ways to do this and the best way to kind of capitalize, I mean that in a good way, on that first experience? We want to acknowledge some of your current first day efforts, and we'll do that in just a bit. We want to share some of those examples that we've propped up based on the research and what we've developed to be able to share out with you. And then as we go along, we can talk about any differences across modalities. So online, synchronous, asynchronous, in-person, hybrid, all of that. You approach some of these differently, in some cases in minor ways, in some cases more significantly, but we'll talk about that across the examples. Okay, and then as always, we want to facilitate idea sharing across this group. The chat is open, as you know, you're using it, that's great. So we want you to continue to put your thoughts in there, put your questions in there, respond to each other. That's great. I'll monitor as I can, but obviously won't be able to do that extensively as the sole presenter and being slightly outnumbered. As you may remember, when you registered in the last couple of weeks, we had a very quick poll for you. How effectively do you feel your current approach engages students on the first day of class? And so this is what we saw as far as your responses across the 4 points. And we had 581 responses total. And you can see the breakdown there on the slide where we've got 360 who said somewhat effective. And we ended up with a mean score of 2.97. We'll just call that 3 on this scale. And that visually stands out here. So it tells us there's certainly opportunity within that group, but for the needs improvement or not effective, that's great. There's a lot of opportunity there. For those that are saying somewhat or very effective, then hopefully you'll be sharing things that you've already been doing and what's worked well. Also, you'll hopefully come up with some new ideas today. So thank you for sharing, and it's always good to see where people are across the group. Okay, so setting the stage a little bit, why day one is so critical. Let's look at some of the evidence-based first day practices. And these aren't necessarily the practices themselves, I should say. They're more of the research that these practices we'll talk about today are tied to. So that primacy effect, we know that first impressions matter. We know that learning can happen most significantly at the beginning and sets the tone for the rest of the process. So what can you do to really make that an impactful experience that's going to last with students, where they're thinking deeply and critical about your course from the first moment, where they're feeling a sense of support and understanding and community and those types of things from day one. And then there goes community building, establishing that sense of belonging. So the sense of belonging, I have to give a quick tip of the hat to Sean Masterman at University of Minnesota for bringing this up in the poll. Was hoping this session had ways of introducing that and addressing that. Some learner-centered strategies. So how can you, from day one, make that first day experience about the students, about the learning process, not just the grades, not just the procedures, not just the administrative information that's sometimes presented during day one. And there's a certain amount of that that is important, but how can you do that in a more engaging manner? The self-determination theory. So how can you facilitate intrinsic motivation, their social development and well-being? How can you get them to think about, okay, I can do this. This is why I want to do this. And the last is growth mindset. So how can you talk about the class as a safe place to fail at times and how to learn from that and know that that's okay, that it's just a process. And whenever you make statements about, somebody not knowing to do something, you always want them to think about adding not yet to the end of that, or just the word yet, because it's a growth, it's a goal, it's a process. So we'll talk about how that can be incorporated into some of these experiences as well. And this will be through students feeling like this is a safe and supported environment. So we'll address that going on as well. And it also has to do with you sharing some of your experiences along the way as a learner. So that'll come up. What we'll do before diving into the examples is I want to hear from you all as to some of the things you're doing currently. What's working for you? What have you tried? Maybe it didn't go perfectly, but what do you have hope for? What have you been doing that's worked well, or what do you have hope for? So let's start with that. We've got the link in the chat. I'll pause and catch up with some of you in a minute. I'll leave the QR code here just to make sure everybody has a chance to fire that off if they are going that route. And then you can be in Padlet and I'll join you in just a moment. Okay, so I'm going to jump to that now, and if need be, I can come back out if anybody needs the QR code still. I triggered that off the wrong way. Let me try again. Okay. Okay, and if you're new to Padlet, down at the lower right, you'll see that plus icon. That's where you can get a pop-up to be able to put in your comment. Feel free to do a like on someone else's or to connect with that person by adding a comment to theirs. So the check-in survey, and so that's something that you could post in the LMS ahead of time, and you could then analyze the responses. You could have ChatGPT do an analysis for you and help you. You could create tag clouds of how people are feeling. You could do all sorts of things, and you can think about how to do that anonymously, but if you also want to do part of it live in person, you can do that as well, just to get students comfortable with speaking to each other about things and not have it always just be factual, but also at times maybe emotional, how they're doing and checking in. Icebreakers, we'll talk about icebreakers briefly, and I'd love to hear what people are doing as effective icebreakers. Sometimes those work well, sometimes they don't. You really want to think about how that might map to your personality and how it might connect to your students. Look at all of these populate, and this is great. By the way, we always make these Padlets available ongoing because you are all a great resource to each other. And so this is great sharing. You'll have access to the Padlet, but what I do is I also capture the Padlet and I have ChatGPT analyze it and give a summary. And so you'll have a summary of what's listed there. That'll be sort of the most significant techniques that were mentioned, the most common comments that were developed. Okay, a lot of them here. Let me just do a scan of any other small group intros. I like that. You can get students used to talking to each other through small group format early on, and then you can expand that and use that in different ways. Bingo activity gaming is a great way to go with different things. It could be gamifying the syllabus, which we'll talk about in a bit. Could be gamifying some of the topics, doing a Jeopardy review, bingo. If you like Kahoots, whatever, those are different techniques that you can use. A survey on the syllabus, great. We'll talk about that. I'll show some examples. A quick write, pair, share. So if some of you know about think, pair, share or write, pair, share, that's a good introductory activity because it's something you might go back to frequently. You can use it for the first day purpose in getting students established with the course and used to each other, but you can also get them used to that process. Okay, wow, love it. So my thing after this session is I'm looking forward to analyzing all of this and creating a summary that we'll share out. And we'll have that embedded in the deck, but we'll also share it out as a resource in a follow-up. Think pair share again, icebreaker. So imagine themselves in a football stadium, identify one object in the space that resonates with who they are, their lifestyle. Share what the object is and why they chose it. It helps understand personality types. Love that. Another icebreaker, what do you like to be called? Pronouns are important as well. Where is your hometown? That could be related to international students, so that really shows the variance across your course and where people are from and cultural identities. What's your favorite dish? Everybody can relate to that. And it may be a dish of their culture they want to share or something of another culture that they really enjoy. I'm seeing Kahoot syllabus quiz, myths versus facts. Ooh, I love that one. Related to your discipline, what are some myths versus facts? That's great. And you can do polling on that. People can vote, is it a myth or is it a fact? And then you as an instructor can reflect the results and then tell what the correct answer is and explain why. So I love that. It gets them involved in exploring the topic right away. The recording, yes, will be coming to everybody registered, recording and all the resources that you're going to see today. Absolutely. So I see the side chat over there. Relationship building, love that. And there were definitely some requests for relationship building. Intros in Padlet, that's great. And Padlet can be used for anonymous activities, but for introductions, you can also have them, of course, make sure their name is stated so students can share as comfortable. What is their favorite song? Great. And then you can create a playlist, and maybe each session you're playing a different song from that playlist. So it's echoing back to students who have chosen those songs, and it's also trying to connect with what current students might be into as far as music. Okay, this is one of my favorite Padlets ever. Thank you so much. 4 corners, last one. Place a number in all 4 corners of the room, ask a couple of questions, and students stand up and move to that corner that represents their answer, and then share out who would like to answer why. And then there can be a dialogue across that you can facilitate. And it doesn't have to be a right or wrong type of thing. It doesn't have to expose students' knowledge necessarily, but maybe it's their stance on something. Maybe it's their experience related to something. All right. Go through the syllabus together and build it together. We're going to talk about that briefly as one of the first ones for sure. And there's a range of comfort with that, and there's also a range of how far you would go with having students co-develop norms or even your syllabus. So I just want to acknowledge that at the outset, but we'll get into it in just a minute. So, this is great. All right, let's see. Encouraging students to ask questions about the subject, even crazy ones. Yeah, and that can go back to the myths. And that might be a way to approach it. Okay, all right, I love it. I'm going to go back to the slideshow just to kind of keep us on track. Thank you again so much for all of that. I'm excited to go back. Okay, so let's explore some of the first day Spark strategies. You already touched upon some of these, but just to make sure that there's common understanding and we kind of go through a scenario, a vignette of some of these, then we'll do that briefly for a handful, and then we'll get into demonstration. So let's look at some of these Spark strategies. So general first day guidelines. So this is before you get into doing any of these Spark strategies, you want to think about setting the stage. Ensure that the LMS is fully prepared with your syllabus, course materials, announcements, and any interactivities students should complete before coming to class, before that first class. And you would want to make that minimal. Maybe you want to do a pulse poll or something like that. Maybe you want to have them do online introductions and then come into the class building upon that. Testing the technology, confirm that it's working. Nothing is worse than first day of class where you're completely grounded and stuck because the technology is not working as you expected. So if it's the technology in the room or your technology or any of the online tools, just make sure you're comfortable, that it's flowing for you, and you know how to do any of the minor troubleshooting for things that might come up. And so that can be any of the hardware or software, interactive boards, polling software, etc. And then plan your Spark. What is that strategy and how will you implement it? There will be your facilitation guide as an instructor, but there's also going to be the instructions that you give students to be able to prepare for and or engage in that activity. And then if you can know your audience, so reviewing your class roster, noting the names, preferred pronouns, how can you know some of those things coming into the first day of class, and then also considering accessibility and any accommodations. If you've been notified about accommodations, respecting those, or in general, just accounting for accessibility and the types of things that you incorporate. Okay, and making that an inclusive environment. So these are some good guidelines, and I wanted to give a quick shout out to Nadine Smith from Northwest University in mentioning this is really critical for lecturers who might be coming into a new environment, have not taught on the campus, have not taught these students before, have been asked to do this last minute. So think about your lecturers especially, and also your new faculty coming into this, because they haven't necessarily been taught this as they went through their grad or doctoral programs. Okay. Now let's get into collaborative norm setting. So how can you guide your students in co-creating a class learning contract, if you want to go that far, or at least the norms for the course and what is expected of them sort of procedurally and behaviorally, and getting them to buy into that and getting them to establish some of the norms. And so that way they can encourage or police each other accordingly. So use a shared document or a live board like Padlet to collect students' thoughts and responses about what would be an effective learning environment. How can it be a positive and engaging space for everybody? So let's look at a quick vignette for that. So in sociology, Professor Ramirez decided to co-create the class norms. She began by posing two questions. What makes a learning environment feel safe and supportive for you? And which behaviors help everyone succeed in a course like this? So again, whether you're in a live course or you're in an asynchronous course, a tool like Padlet can help you to have students respond. And again, you can have them analyze live, come up with these norms. You can have a side document or another Padlet where you start drafting those agreed upon norms. And then you can use those, post those into your LMS, into the course, and be able to have those as student endorsed, student created and student endorsed norms for the course. And you can see in this instance where weeks later it did come up again, where, again, it's about the ideas, not the people necessarily. So don't target the people that you might disagree with, but just maybe debate or discuss the ideas and come to your understanding and what your differences might be, and that it's around the ideas. Okay. So let me get the chat back up. That disappeared as I transitioned back into the slides. I just want to, as much as I can, get a pulse. Let's see, the Padlet. Okay, that's in there again. Great. And again, you have ongoing access, so feel free to go back later to the Padlet. So thanks for asking, Becky. And then why would you use collaborative norm setting? So you're promoting ownership. When students feel they have ownership for their learning and for the collective learning process, they're going to be more involved and engaged and feel like it's about them. They're going to feel more empowered. It encourages inclusivity. So you're going to reflect diverse perspectives and needs through their contributions. It reinforces respect in general, and then it fosters collaboration. It helps to set up that collaborative environment, that collaborative dialogue. And if you were someone who wanted to go deeper into this topic, we actually offered a webinar about 1.5 years ago. And the recording's there, everything still stands, it's current. And this was Megan Owens, who's now at Florida International University. We had her on to go through a webinar with us on how to engage students on day one by collaboratively developing or designing the syllabus. And as you look at the syllabus and developing that collaboratively, Megan was great about saying, okay, these are the things that are open to co-development with students. These are the things that stand as is. They need to be the way they are, policies and things like that. Things that you as an instructor or the institution need to own. With grading, you can allow input on some things for students, but you might have certain things that need to be tied to the objectives very specifically. It really depends on your course objectives or program objectives. But if you're interested in going deeper into that, then we do have the webinar and resources related to collaborative syllabus design. And the link is in the chat. Great. The second one is building curiosity through questions. So how can you start with sort of a mystery, an open-ended question that intrigues students? So a couple quick examples. If you had $1 million to solve one environmental problem, how would you spend it? $1 million may not sound like much. You can adjust the value as you choose. You can adjust the context, but these are just to give you some ideas. Cultural anthropology, what's a custom in another culture you'd want to adopt and why? So, and then whenever you want to, you could go back to these questions as you're getting into how they're applied deeper in your course. Okay. So that's a way to start triggering curiosity of students related to the course context, but trying to do it in a way where they're going to just think openly, day one, broad prompt, and think about that. And then you can revisit it. You can analyze students' responses, and then you can check in and go forward from there. And you can talk about any great ideas. You can talk about anything that might have been off track and why. And it's not to single out students, and you wouldn't want to do that, but it just creates a dialogue. Okay. Let's say the primacy effect in action here, then looking at a vignette a little bit closer. This is one professor who actually started with a very dramatic question. How would you survive a zombie apocalypse? And so looking at social behavior and human behavior and stress and instantly capturing her students' attention, this was the approach that she used. They even were able to come back to it and think about that prompt and some of the things that they experienced on day one. It helped to break the ice, but it also set tone for a very, actively engaged semester through some of their discussions. And so the zombie theme is pretty popular, and Last of Us, next season is coming out pretty soon. This is something that a lot of students are, very tapped into that theme. And so how can you bring that in? And again, this isn't something you have to carry out through the entire course, and it doesn't have to take away the academic rigor of your course, so to speak, but it gets them thinking and applying some of the things, at least generally, from your course. Looking real quick, let's see. Heather, thank you. You can have students help with creating a course AI policy. Love it. Yeah. So that's another thing. I said policies were off the books, but those are really the institutional policies are stated and concrete. It's your course policies you do have more flexibility in as an instructor. Yeah, guidelines. That's another way to frame them. Like it. Art history, giving them 2 images from ancient cultures, asking them to decide which one is older and what's their reasoning. Love that. And again, think about how you want them to respond. Is it into a doc anonymously? You compare and contrast, and then you discuss. And you as an instructor, as the subject matter expert, if you want, you can then break it down for them and then go forward. So thanks for those contributions. Okay, so why this works: it ignites curiosity. It demonstrates the relevance to your subject matter, but also ties it to some real world scenarios. It encourages them to actively engage. So a big part of this day one strategy stuff, these spark strategies, is sparking curiosity, sparking involvement and engagement. All the research I've been involved with and the research I review on effectiveness of courses and students' ratings of courses, no matter how highly they rate the course, they always want more engagement. And we as instructors are always saying, well, our students just aren't engaged. So how can we think of these as strategies to get them more engaged so we both get what we want? So that's another reason, building that anticipation. So if you have these exciting moments in day one, then they're going to start wanting to anticipate what's coming next. And you can carry that forward and it kind of builds. Okay. And the last one I kind of spoke to already as far as the culture of inquiry, getting them to ask questions, getting them to critically think throughout the course. Okay, quick chat, pause check. Love it. Thanks, folks, for sharing those ideas and affirmations to each other as well. Okay, let's look at the next spark strategy. So design an immersive first day activity to spark that curiosity. So how can you even create an engaging hands-on activity? Could be a demonstration, but ideally it's something students can engage in hands-on. And they don't have to do it perfectly. They don't need to have a ton of preparation, but it's a hands-on activity that gives them exposure to what you're going to be covering in the course and things you might be asking them to do going forward. So how would you be able to do that? So let's look at an example. So Professor Kim begins with an introductory economics class by saying, you've just inherited $50,000 and your goal is to maximize your financial growth over the next year while managing risk. How will you invest it? Now, these are students coming into this where they've most likely never had that type of money at their disposal. They are coming into an introductory economics class, so they have to start thinking, well, what are the factors? How would I try and take that asset, that resource, and grow and build upon that? What are the risks of different decisions I would make? Do I want to play it safe, put it here and have it grow slow and be more persistent and patient? Or do I want to throw it on something that might catch fire in a good way to begin with, but then might burn up completely? And I don't like using that word right now with what's happening with fires. Sorry. Yeah, so groups are given 15 minutes to brainstorm and outline their investment strategies, and they can do that in small groups. Each group can write the explanation of their choices and any risks they anticipate, and then people can compare their stories, and then you as the instructor can touch upon what would be the pros and cons of different strategies. And it could be pros and cons based on the current environment, financial environment, or pros and cons based on how things might change in the near future based on the economy and different factors. Okay, so that's another suggestion there. Okay, let me do a time check. We're halfway, we're great. Okay, so another reason why that would work, so sparking curiosity, we've seen that a couple times. Establishing relevance, so the activity is going to get them into the context. And that's a great way to do that. And then it's group work. So you're getting them acting and doing together, which is going to build upon a lot of the other principles that we talked about earlier, but fostering collaboration is a great thing to do. And another common frustration with expressed from instructors is, group work and students collaborating and, hard to establish in community. So these are designed to be able to do that. So if you start doing it from day one, they're going to feel it. They're going to move forward more naturally through that, where instead if day one is more procedural and informational only, and then you get to the group activity and you just throw them into it, then it's not going to feel as natural to them. There's not that sense of community and trust. Seeing more on myth versus fact, great. I look forward to reviewing that. And then if you have any examples of, myth fact comparisons or contexts, feel free to share that here or in the Padlet. Let's look at number 4, facilitating learning stories for community building. So how can you have students share their learning stories? What motivates them? What experiences have they had? What are their goals? And again, trying to get students to think of, okay, here's why I'm here for this. You're going to treat that differently based on whether it's a level 1 course, whether it's a majors course, whether it's an advanced or grad course or professional studies type course. But how can you get them to think about the purpose of why they're there? Is it very specific and tied to a professional aspect, or is it, broader liberal studies and how that's going to develop them and help them more broadly? So you can think about that in your contexts. Okay, students will start thinking about their journey with a mutual understanding and engagement. And you're going to, again, set the stage for a more collaborative learning process. Let's see, Kara, is the first day activity meant to be an icebreaker or an additional segment in the class? Well, to me, an icebreaker is a very specific first day activity you might use, and it could be something that's very brief, but the first day activities can also be larger than that. And I didn't specifically bring up icebreakers because I'm looking at things that are a little bit bigger than that, but icebreakers can certainly be important to maybe as a first step. So you can certainly consider those, and I know people have brought up some of their examples here and in the Padlet. Okay, so let's talk about circles of story and what that means. So Professor Carter began the class with an activity she called Circle of Stories. Students were asked to share a brief story about why they chose their major, what they hoped to learn from the course, and to her surprise, one student revealed a personal connection that deeply resonated with others. He was going to study environmental science after much of his community was devastated by a wildfire. And I have to say, this was an example that was created weeks ago, not in the last couple of days. So it's not meant to relate to the current events that are happening. By the end of the first day, students were already chatting, finding common ground, and forming study groups. In the midterm survey, a student actually made a comment back to how that enabled them to be comfortable speaking up in class. Let's see, setting a tone of engagement, speaking out. Students who have anxiety about having to speak out. Yeah, and that's a good point Heather brings up in the chat that I want to bring up for any of these is how can you have multiple ways for students to contribute? Ideally, you're going to be able to move them toward contributing more openly across the course, across their peers, but you're not always going to get that with students. There are going to be different anxieties. There are going to be different communication levels, different cultural preferences. So we want to have multiple modes of interactivity and engagement and communication for students. And so I've been trying to mention different things that could be individual, reflective, think, pair, share type things, small group things, things that could be across the group, things that could be polling, could be Padlet, but you're allowing students to express themselves and you're actively engaging them. And it doesn't have to be that you've had them do it directly out to the class and that you've identified them, but at least they're feeling heard and involved and are able to express themselves. So that's just something to think about in making sure that you're allowing students different forms of expressing and contributing, and thinking about when it should be anonymous and when it could be smaller group, larger group. And that could evolve over the course of the semester. And it's something that you can address day one with your students, that you're acknowledging. Some are going to have more comfort than others. And also by creating a sense of safety. And I have another technique coming up that'll also talk about another strategy. So we'll get there a little bit deeper in just a second. Okay. Also in Circle of Stories, you can share your perspective. Why did you choose this field? Why did you find it so fascinating, so exciting, and why did you study it so deeply? So what was your moment in getting you on that path, and how did that evolve? It's always good when you can put yourself into this as well. So they know that you're personally engaged with this. It's more than just a job. It's more than, showing up for them on Tuesday, Thursday, and office hours. Okay, fostering belonging, and that's one that came up, and Sean Masterman, if you're here, faculty member at Minnesota, University of Minnesota, brought this up, and so these were different things that I saw brought up in the pre-session poll that was planned for this session, so I just wanted to make some touch points there. So how can you foster that belonging, encouraging that vulnerability? So as you bring in personal stories, as you get students to feel safe sharing personal stories, then they're going to feel more valued and respected, and they're not going to be worried about always being right. Okay, humanizing the class. I like that. And I also like to mention that a class is about community, not content. There is a certain amount of content that's important for students to learn and help them move toward the outcomes, but class is more about community than just content, for sure, absolutely. And let's see, I see a comment about an environment where mistakes are seen as a natural part. We're getting to that example here in just a minute, not quite yet. Love that though. So gamifying expectations. You can make your syllabus more fun and impactful. You can have an interactive syllabus challenge. You can turn it into an online scavenger hunt, a quiz, whatever you want to do. Try and make it fun and engaging. I know some instructors who have had these very extensive syllabi, 10, 12 more pages long, very dense, and they'll hide a word in one of the policy statements, and they'll penalize students if they don't find that hidden word that they've injected to it. So don't do anything where you're trying to trick students and where you're going to penalize students for not finding something that's been hidden to them. Try and make it about them finding this in a positive way and how this is set up to support their success in the course. And so where do you submit assignments, addressing something like that? How many student hours are offered weekly? I use the term student hours instead of office hours. I have followed the lead of others in the field who are starting to do that, so that it's more about the students' needs and they're coming in to be served and supported It's not office hours where you come in and tell me what's wrong and why you're struggling. It's really about you and how you can be supported and what you need and how to make things effective for you. You can have small prizes or shout out for the fastest or most accurate responses. I like to make this team-based, and I don't heavily do it on speed because I know processing times are different. I don't want to skew the reward system. So it could be about the most accurate responses. You might also randomly select the correct responses. And different people have different ideas about giving extra credit points. That's too soft. You know, you do the way you need to do it, but you can adapt this to any of those ways as far as points or not. So here's just a quick thing on gamifying the syllabus. So first day, Professor Blake turns the syllabus review into a scavenger hunt. The class was divided in small teams. They were given a list of questions to answer. Here's a couple. What percentage of your grade is the final paper worth? How can you schedule time during Professor Blake's student hours? So each correct answer earns points, and you can weight points differently or not. First team to finish received a small prize or bonus participant points or snacks, whatever you want to do. Again, that's going to be also based on whether this is in person or virtual. As it unfolded, students eagerly combed through the syllabus, learning not just the logistics, but also how to navigate the LMS, which is critical, so they can actually go into the LMS and figure out where they submit assignments, where do they find due dates, how do they check announcements, all those different things that you want them to be doing. Prop this up as an exploratory activity for them and make it fun. So, and I see some of you already doing this. That's great. So feel free to share any of your tools and techniques here that have made it most effective. Okay, any of the, some of these I'm addressing through the course of the example itself or across examples. So again, engagement around the syllabus, that it's an actually important document and here are the most important aspects and here's what I want you to get out of it. Enhancing their retention. So you often hear students just don't read the syllabus. Well, if it's something that's very procedural and it's dry and it's boring or it's threatening to them, presented as a threatening to them, do this or else, then they're not going to be as engaged and not retain it as effectively. So it's not that they didn't pay attention, but there isn't retention. So how can you use this more effectively? Okay, reinforces clarity is the only thing that we haven't mentioned yet. Reviewing any common misconceptions during the debrief, that can help them. And each course is a little bit different. They might be used to how things have been done in prior courses. If something's different in your course, they really need to know that from day one. So how can that be clarified for them? Now here's the last one, failure as growth. Last one, at least that I'm presenting. You have more, of course. I'm seeing Notebook LM. Oh, of course, Heather, thank you. Yeah, there are some great things, and we're looking forward to doing a session in the near future on possibilities with Notebook LM. So stay tuned for that. This one, failure as growth, that was alluded to earlier, is that it should be seen as okay to fail, that's part of the learning process. So this activity is called My Biggest Learning Mistake. And as an instructor, it would be a great thing to do going into this activity for you to share a failure that you had along the way as a learner. I can think of many myself. I'm first generation high school graduate, college graduate. I did not know how to be a student. I was able to make my way over a very long college career to eventually feel competent and confident. So I had many mistakes along the way, and sometimes it was in my learning, but it was also just understanding how the process worked as far as the course and the program and things like that. So share with your students how you started out at the beginning and how you made your way through and where you stumbled along the way. That helps to humanize things and it helps them to be at ease. You don't always want to act like such an expert. Is one of the things that I tell instructors is don't always act like the expert. They want to also hear how you learned, not just where you are now. Invite students to share their experiences, but again, sharing failures is going to be difficult for some. They're going to maybe feel embarrassed. not want to share, so you could have it also be anonymous. You could have mixed modality if you want to as well. Have a Padlet, have live sharing, and be able to analyze the two or discuss the two. Okay, let's see, emphasize the course as a safe space. This begins to do that. And again, by you opening up, you create that space where it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay not to be perfect. What you do is you just want to reflect on any of those mistakes, so to speak, and then be able to build upon those. And that's how you can talk about your assessment and feedback process, is that you're going to assess them and give them positive feedback for things they do great, but then it's also designed to be a learning process, and you're going to give feedback to hopefully help them grow and succeed going further. So here's one where, a personal story is shared about learning through mistakes. This instructor failed their first college calculus exam. She admitted how overwhelmed she was, but also how she learned to approach challenges differently. She started to seek help, worked more intentionally, started to seek her peers for support and do study groups and things like that. So this helps students to think about different strategies as they grow in their learning experience. A student also shared how they initially struggled to learn coding, but found success through their persistence and peer support. So then it started to dialogue out through the group. And then you can see the professor emphasized opportunities to learn. You're willing to keep trying, and I'm here to support you. So it's okay to make mistakes, learn from it, seek support, whether through your peers or coming to see me. Okay, and students reflected upon that later, and they knew they could do these things in class or through assignments without fear of judgment, that this instructor wasn't looking to weed students out arbitrarily, that they were there to challenge them to a certain degree and challenge them to grow. That's what learning's all about. Okay, so you want to normalize struggles, model vulnerability and make that okay. Resilience is a big one, letting them know that if you were to stumble, that's not the end. Keep trying, improve, seek support as needed, but be resilient. You belong, and you're being supported to succeed. Okay, and you can see the last couple there. I'm not going to read every bullet. Let's take a pause from me speaking through the examples. Let's go to Padlet for a little bit more engagement. What are potentially some new ideas through what I've shared, but also all the sharing that's been happening through the chat? What are some new ideas you have at this moment to engage, motivate, and inspire? So we'll go there, and you can go there now. I'll go in a moment after the QR code's been up a bit, and then we'll get into some live examples. And when I say new ideas, it's not that they're fully formed, but what are some new things you might want to try based on what you've seen on the slides or read in the chat? Okay, going there now. See you in the Padlet. And this Padlet will also continue to be available through the slide deck, through the URL that you're at right now. And also I will analyze this and put the analysis in the slide deck. So wanting to now gamify the syllabus, great. And so if you're getting tired of hearing yourself go over everything, imagine how the students may feel. That's good you're reflecting on that. Interactive syllabus quiz, so another good example. Student hours, yes. Anytime you can flip things to be about the students, that's always great. And it removes that barrier of feeling like, oh, I'm going to the office. They grew up being told, oh, you're in trouble, go to the office. I saw a circle of stories mentioned, great. And again, think about your contexts, think about your students, think about the modality based on your course modality. using the build curiosity, so the $1 million prompt. What would you do to start a business right now? Love it. And they'll have great ideas, they'll stumble on ideas, but that's an opportunity for dialogue. And it gets them engaged in thinking about the course, not the course requirements. Student created attendance policy. Yeah, you can have a student created deadline policy, student created, what is the artifact for this course or for this assignment policy? What can they submit that shows they've learned something? Use of Kahoot for syllabus quiz, great. Creating a safe place, great. So anything you can do to address that through dialogue and activities. Student created AI policy, another one. So starting with a case study. Yeah, that could be a good introductory challenge. That could be that hands-on activity, that's Spark that we talked about. Ask students their version on the topic of the day. I like that. I'm not entirely clear of an example. Feel free to add a comment to your own post if you want to. Just curious to know a little bit more if you're willing to share. Starting with a mystery. And again, it doesn't have to be something that goes perfect. It doesn't have to be something that's totally intellectually grounded, but if it's related to the topic and it just gets them thinking and critically thinking and exploring and curious, that's a great start. And then you can guide them down the path a bit more directly with those qualities. Playing the game Never Have I Ever, that could be an icebreaker, but making it related to course content or the topic. Feel free if anybody wants to add comments on examples to that one in the right-hand column. Let's see, myth versus truth, that was a great one. So yeah, I see people voting these up, so to speak, with the likes. That's great. Identity portraits. Creating a visual representation of themselves, a collage or drawing. I love that. And that could be done physically or digitally. They could create their own Padlet. That's their identity portrait. I love that. It could be a PowerPoint slide, whatever you think is best. They could have access and they each have a slide and there's your identity portrait across the course. Could be a Padlet. Love it. Okay, I'll do a quick scan on others. Oh, we're getting close to end of time. I was going to get you into a couple examples. Thank you for all of these. I'm going to jump back to the slides. And again, you'll access those ongoing and take information from each other's ideas. So let me go into creating some of your own first day versions. So we have our resources. We have our Curie platform, Curie. And in our Curie platform, we have these teaching optimizers. So these optimizers will allow you to create your own first day versions rapidly. And so these are tools, templates, and wizards, if you will. You'll see them in just a moment, where you can input chunks of information related to prompts that we give you. And then these are AI enabled, where we've got some AI prompting and some learning science together to take the information you've given and then create the resource for you. And then it's something that would be downloadable and editable by you. You can share it with others or not. But let's look at some of the examples here. So these are some of the examples that we looked at today. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and back out and go into our collection here. So in a moment, you'll have access to this collection of first day activity optimizers. So we have a checklist, which is a static form. And so the checklist, I wanted to give props to Melissa Fees from South Mountain Community College, who said, it'd be great to have a checklist as a result of this section. So when I read that yesterday, I created a checklist and we've now got this available for you. So you'll get that shared in just a moment as well when we get back to the slides. So let's look at one, or if time, probably one example given time left, but you can go through these yourself. So let's look at facilitating learning stories. And so here's an example of the optimizer. Let's see. That's not responding. Let me do a refresh here. Okay. So this is what we call an optimizer. And so it's got a couple of steps to it. It gives you the context of what that resource is designed to help you do. Our AI statement about how we use AI, which I stated a moment ago, but also that we keep the information in our own instance. It doesn't go elsewhere. It doesn't go public. It doesn't go to train a Gen AI model or an LLM. So that's just important for you to know. So privacy is respected and data is protected. What I'm going to do is go ahead and do some quick copy and pastes to get you an example. So as an instructor, I can put in the name of my course. Let's say that it's an online synchronous course. And let's say that I'd like students to, so I'm pasting these very quickly. You can see some of the results there. And then I go to this last example and I paste in my response. So just by giving it a few of the responses and then with the prompting that's behind it toward the purpose and context and output, it's currently loading the response. And that usually just takes, a matter of 5-10 seconds. And then what you'll get here is something that you would then be able to post into your LMS to prepare students for this activity. Or in person, you could put this into slide format or put it up on the screen as instructions or read it off to them verbally, however you chose to deliver that. And again, this is editable, and you'll see where to do that in just a moment. I could say regenerate and get a slightly different version possibly, but let's say I like what's here for the most part, so I'm going to move forward to the next step. And that's where it's going to develop a facilitation guide that's more for the instructor to prepare to deliver the activity. We're going to add the link and access to these resources in just a moment when I get back, because I don't want you playing while I'm playing. So the facilitation guide here is what you would have as your resource offline. You're not going to post this for the students, but it's helping you as far as the context and how to prepare for and implement this activity with students. I'm going to, for time purposes, go to the review section. We've got just a few minutes left. So here it is looking at it in a printable format. So this is, again, what students would see. And I'm going to go to the complete section because here then as the instructor, you could directly port it into your LMS. That's for campuses where we have, working agreement where we're working with with that campus specifically, and that we have instructors able to take these resources and put it right into their learning management system. So now, boom, there's that activity or there's that assignment that's been created sitting there for them to be able to present to their students. So you can do that, and then you can also view it, edit it, or download it. You can also share it with colleagues. So somebody who's teaching the same course, different section, somebody at a different institution who's in a similar situation. Those are all the things. And here's the implementation guide. We have the rationale statement because we always like to do things backed by research or evidence-based. So we have a when, why, how statement for all of our optimizers. And we've got, I'm thinking about 100 of these optimizers on different tasks related to teaching and learning so far. Okay, so for time purposes, I'm going to go back here and, oops, let me go to the collection. Let me back up to my portfolio just to show you also what's in Curie. As a user, you would have a portfolio that you can develop and share however much information you want to share or not on some of these things. And then you can build a portfolio of different types of resources like you're seeing today or on many, many other topics. And if I go briefly to the Discover link at the top here, Discover means you're looking for resources that are going to help you complete tasks. And you can see there are different categories here under inclusive teaching related to AI, developing learning activities and engagement, creating media, effective assessment, all sorts of different things. If I click on effective assessment, then that'll take me to a list of resources. That's I just need to scroll down a little bit more here. Let's go with, if I want assessment ideas, I can click and enter assessment. And then we have different resources related to AI and assessment. How much AI do you want present or not in different student assignments? how to control for that, and here are examples, and we can help you with that. And then I saw there was a question about who can use these resources. So we have these resources. We have what's called freemium version, where you can use a limited number of these optimizers, the ones that are AI enabled, sort of the top tier level resources. You can access a limited number of those. And then we also have resources that are more, let's say, static resources and guidelines. Those are open access to anybody to access unlimited. So hopefully that clarifies for you. Okay, so let me go back. That's a little bit about Discover, where you can type in different tasks or topics that you're trying to address, and you can get these resources. Let me go back to the presentation here and the slideshow as we go into our last 2 minutes. And I want to make sure before I give you the access to the resources that I'm just able to see if there are any hanging important questions. So I'm bringing up chat here, and I know there's a lot up above that I haven't seen that have passed by. Hopefully you have gotten some great new ideas through this session, through participation and sharing by others in this community, and then also the resources that we're giving you now as far as these optimizers that can help you put in context of your course and help you develop a tool or a resource that you can implement quickly with your students. So let's go ahead and give you the link and the QR code. You'll also get this in our follow-up email that'll come out in a few days with the recording and all the resources that you saw today. So know that if you don't capture this coming out of the session, that you'll have it again. And so that link's going to be put into chat momentarily. And I see the session affirmations and thank yous. I really appreciate that. Always try to create something that's insightful, resourceful, and engaging, and involves you and moves you along further and further in your work. So I appreciate that very much. Okay, did we get the link put in there? Yes, we did put it in there at 9:59. So if folks want to find that, I'm going to go on to the next slide because it has another resource, specifically the first day of class checklist. And I know that right now, people who can access our Curie platform, it's .edu addresses, and currently it's in the United States domestic accounts. This resource here, however, the first day of class checklist, this is available to anyone, anywhere, anytime, unlimited. So that link will get into the chat for you if it hasn't happened already. There, you have the first day of class checklist. In closing, thank you again for all of your contributions and presentations. The other thing is, we do these webinars every 3 weeks approximately, so look for announcements for our next ones. We have a lot of exciting ideas for the first part of 2025 and ongoing. So thank you very much and hope to see you again before too long.